The iron chains burned where they touched Rosalyn's wrists, and she bit down hard on the inside of her cheek to keep from crying out as the guards dragged her across the obsidian floor of the Moonstone Court. Every step sent fresh agony shooting through her arms, the metal searing into skin that had known nothing but rough fabric and cold stone for the past 3 years. Around her, the assembled Fey nobility watched with expressions ranging from mild curiosity to open contempt, their perfect faces luminous in the ethereal light that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. She kept her eyes down, focusing on the intricate silver patterns inlaid in the black floor, on anything but the hundreds of immortal gazes fixed upon her. The chains clinked with each stumbling step, announcing her humiliation to every corner of the vast throne room. Her plain servant's dress, gray and threadbare, marked her as clearly as any brand. In a court where status was everything, where magic sang in the blood of even the lowest courtiers, she was nothing, less than nothing. "Bring the mortal forward!" The voice that rang out was cold, imperious, belonging to Lord Hectorus, the High Chancellor who had ordered her arrest. Rosalyn's breath caught as the guards yanked her chains, forcing her to her knees at the base of the dais where the council sat in judgment. The impact sent fresh pain radiating through her legs, but she barely noticed it over the terror clawing at her throat. "This servant stands accused of theft," Lord Hectorus continued, his voice carrying easily through the cavernous space. "Of stealing a sacred moonstone amulet from Lady Isoldra's chambers. A capital offense, made all the more egregious by the fact that she is mortal. She has no right to even touch such artifacts, much less take them." A murmur rippled through the assembled court. Rosalyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to protest, too, scream that she was innocent, that she'd never stolen anything in her life. But she knew better than to speak without permission. Mortals who served in the Moonstone Court learned quickly that their voices meant nothing here. "The penalty for such theft," Lord Hectorus said, "is death, followed by the casting of her mortal soul into the void, where she will suffer for eternity among the shadows." The chamber fell silent. Rosalyn's vision swam, and for a moment she thought she might faint. Death. The void. She'd heard the stories whispered among the servants, tales of what happened to those whose souls were cast into that lightless realm of torment. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible. "I didn't take anything. I swear it on my life. I never—" "Silence!" Lord Hectorus's magic crackled through the air, and Rosalyn's words died in her throat as invisible force closed around her windpipe. "You will speak when given leave to speak, mortal, not before." The pressure released, and Rosalyn gasped for air, tears streaming down her face now. Through her blurred vision, she could see Lady Isoldra standing to one side, her expression serene and satisfied. The lady's golden hair gleamed like spun sunlight, her violet eyes cold as winter frost. There was no mercy there, no doubt. Only certainty in Rosalyn's guilt. "Before we proceed with sentencing, protocol requires we verify the accused's nature," another voice announced. Lord Calum, master of blood rites, stepped forward holding a crystalline dagger that pulsed with silver light. "Even servants have been known to hide their true bloodlines. We must be certain we are executing a mortal, not one of Fey descent." Rosalyn's blood turned to ice. The blood rite. They were going to cut her, test her blood against sacred moonstone to prove she was mortal before they killed her. Her secret, the one she'd guarded so carefully for 3 years, was about to be exposed, and when they discovered the truth, death would be the kindest fate awaiting her. "No, please," she started, but Lord Hectorus's magic silenced her again. It was then that the great doors at the far end of the throne room opened, and a hush fell over the court so complete that Rosalyn could hear her own ragged breathing. The temperature in the chamber dropped, shadows pooling in the corners and sliding across the floor like living things. Even through her panic, she felt the shift in the air, the way every fae in the room suddenly stood straighter, their expressions transforming from bored superiority to wary respect. Footsteps echoed on the obsidian floor, measured and unhurried. Rosalyn didn't dare lift her head, but she could track his progress by the ripple of movement through the assembled courtiers, the way they parted like water before a ship's prow. The shadows deepened with each step, until the very light seemed to bend around whoever was approaching. "An execution," the newcomer said, his voice low and rich, carrying an undercurrent of power that made the air vibrate. "And I wasn't invited to witness. How remarkably discourteous of you, Hectorus." Lord Hectorus bowed, and Rosalyn heard something she'd never expected from the arrogant chancellor. Deference. "Your Majesty, we did not expect you to return from the Shadowlands so soon. This is merely a routine matter, hardly worthy of your attention." "Your Majesty." The words sent a fresh wave of terror through Rosalyn. Only one fae held that title in the Moonstone Court. Zayn, the Shadow King, High Lord of the Dark Fae and ruler of the territories that bordered the mortal realm. She'd never seen him in her 3 years of servitude, had only heard whispers of his power, his ruthlessness, the way he could command darkness itself to do his bidding. Routine? The Shadow King's footsteps stopped, and Rosalyn sensed he was close now, somewhere just beyond her limited field of vision. "Then why do I smell fear thick as blood in this chamber? Why does the accused tremble so violently her chains sing?" Against every instinct screaming at her to keep her eyes down, Rosalyn looked up. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp edges and lethal grace, tall and lean, dressed in black that seemed woven from shadow itself, with hair as dark as a moonless night falling to his shoulders. But it was his eyes that trapped her, held her immobile like a mouse before a serpent. They were silver, pure silver without iris or pupil, and they blazed with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. And he was staring at her, with an expression she couldn't name, something between shock and recognition and hunger. The Shadow King inhaled deeply, and Rosalyn watched his eyes flare brighter, watched his entire body go utterly still. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, become rougher, almost reverent. "Who is this girl?" "A mortal servant, Your Majesty," Lord Hectorus said. "Accused of theft. We were just about to perform the Blood Rite before—" "No." The single word cracked through the air like a whip, and shadows exploded from the Shadow King, spreading across the floor in a tide of darkness. "No one touches her. Not until I understand what I'm sensing." He moved then, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides, and suddenly he was kneeling before Rosalyn, one hand reaching out to tilt her chin up so their eyes met fully. His touch was cool against her fevered skin, gentle despite the power she could feel crackling just beneath his surface. "What is your name?" he asked, and his voice had dropped to something almost tender, though his eyes still burned with that unsettling light. "Rosalyn," she whispered. "My name is Rosalyn, Your Majesty." He leaned closer, and she realized with a start that he was scenting her, drawing in her presence like one might inhale the perfume of a rare flower. His eyes drifted closed for a moment, and when they opened again, they were blazing. "Moonflower and starlight," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Ancient magic, hidden deep. And beneath it all..." He paused, his grip on her chin tightening fractionally. "Fate." "Your Majesty," Lord Hectorus interrupted, his voice strained. "I don't understand. She's only a mortal servant. What could you possibly—" "She is no mortal." The Shadow King rose fluidly to his feet, though his hand remained on Rosalyn's shoulder, a weight that felt both protective and claiming. "Perform the Blood Rite. Now, I want to see what she truly is." Terror spiked through Rosalyn so sharply she gasped. "Please, no! Please don't!" "Peace," the Shadow King said, his hand tightening on her shoulder. "Whatever the blood reveals, you are under my protection now. Do you understand? No harm will come to you in this court." She didn't understand, couldn't comprehend why the Shadow King himself would care about a servant girl accused of theft. But there was something in his voice, in the way he stood over her like a shield, that made her nod shakily. Lord Calum approached with the crystalline dagger, his expression troubled but determined. The blade gleamed as he knelt beside Rosalyn, reaching for her bound hand. The iron chains prevented her from pulling away as he made a shallow cut across her palm. Blood welled up, dark red against her pale skin, and he held her hand over a moonstone basin that materialized from thin air. 3 drops of blood fell into the basin. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the moonstone began to glow. Not the soft white light that indicated mortal blood, nor even the gentle blue of lesser fae. The stone blazed with radiance so brilliant that courtiers cried out, shielding their eyes. Silver and gold light spiraled up from the basin, forming intricate patterns in the air, ancient symbols that hadn't been seen in the Moonstone Court for over 1,000 years. "By the ancient stars," Lord Calum breathed, staggering back from the basin. "That's impossible. Those are the marks of the first blood, the original Fae lineage, the ones who ruled these lands before my ancestors took the throne," the Shadow King finished, his voice carrying a dark amusement. The hand on Rosalyn's shoulder tightened, became unmistakably possessive. "No wonder I scented power on her. No wonder fate itself sang when I drew near." He looked down at Rosalyn, and there was triumph in his silver eyes. "She's not mortal. She's first blood. And if my senses don't deceive me..." He inhaled again, and a slow, dangerous smile curved his lips. "She's mine." The throne room erupted into chaos. Courtiers shouted over one another, their voices rising in a cacophony of shock and disbelief. Lady Isoldra's face had gone white as fresh snow, her violet eyes wide with something that looked like terror. Lord Hectorus was demanding order, his magic crackling through the air, but no one was listening. Rosalyn couldn't breathe. First blood. The words echoed in her mind, bringing with them a flood of memories she'd tried so hard to suppress. Her mother's desperate whispers, the night she'd shoved Rosalyn into the mortal realm with nothing but a plain dress and instructions to hide, to never use her magic, to never let anyone know what she truly was. The sounds of battle, of dying screams, as the current royal family had hunted down every last member of the First Blood, exterminating them to secure their own claim to power. She was supposed to be dead. Everyone with First Blood was supposed to be dead. "Enough!" The Shadow King's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk, and shadows erupted from him in a wave that forced every fae in the chamber to their knees. Only Rosalyn remained standing, or rather kneeling in her chains, held upright by his hand on her shoulder. "This changes everything. The girl is not a thief. She is First Blood, which means she has more right to be in this court than half of you assembled here." "Your Majesty, you can't possibly mean to," Lord Hectorus began, but the Shadow King silenced him with a look. "I mean to claim her as my mate," the Shadow King said, and the words fell into the sudden silence like stones into still water. His hand moved from Rosalyn's shoulder to cup her face, tilting it up so she had no choice but to meet his burning silver gaze. "The fates have decreed it. Her scent calls to my very soul. I have waited 300 years to find her, and I will not be denied now." Rosalyn's heart stopped. Mate. The word resonated through her entire being, awakening something she'd kept locked away deep inside herself. She could feel it now, that pull toward him, that inexplicable certainty that he was right, that whatever existed between them was written in the stars themselves. But fear warred with that recognition. She barely knew him, and if he claimed her, if he bound himself to First Blood when his family had helped slaughter hers— "You can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Your Majesty, please. If you claim me, you'll make yourself a target. The old laws—" "The old laws are dust and ash," he said, cutting her off. "And any who would threaten what is mine will learn why they call me the Shadow King." He turned back to the assembled court, and the shadows around him darkened, became solid, became weapons that hung in the air like promised violence. "Remove her chains. Now!" Lord Calum scrambled to obey, his hands shaking as he touched the iron with a neutralization spell that made the metal fall away like water. The moment the chains released, Rosalyn gasped at the relief, at the cessation of pain. But before she could even process her freedom, the Shadow King was lifting her to her feet, his arm sliding around her waist to support her weight. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I think so," she managed, though her legs trembled with exhaustion and shock and the overwhelming strangeness of being held by the Shadow King himself. "Lean on me. Let them see that you're under my protection." His arm tightened around her, and she felt heat spread through her body where they touched, felt her magic she'd suppressed for 3 years, stir in response to his presence. "I will explain everything soon. But first, we must deal with those who sought to harm you." He turned his attention to Lady Isoldra, who had been trying to edge toward the exit. Shadows snaked across the floor and wrapped around her ankles, holding her in place. She froze, and for the first time since Rosalyn had known the beautiful, arrogant lady, she saw true fear in those violet eyes. "Lady Isoldra," the Shadow King said, his voice carrying the promise of violence. "You accused this girl of theft. You demanded her execution. And yet I find it curious that mere moments before my arrival, the supposedly stolen amulet was discovered in your own jewelry box, exactly where it belonged." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Why would you accuse an innocent servant of such a crime?" I must have been mistaken, Your Majesty," Lady Isoldra stammered, her perfect composure cracking. "The girl resembles another servant who—" Lies. The word cracked like thunder, and the shadows around Lady Isoldra tightened, making her cry out. Tell me the truth, or I will have it pulled from your mind piece by bloody piece. Lady Isoldra's face crumpled, tears streaming down her perfect cheeks. She looked at you. The words burst from her like poison released from a wound. At the last court gathering when you passed through the servants' corridor, she looked up at you and you paused. You looked at her. I've tried for 50 years to gain your attention, but you never once looked at me the way you looked at her in that moment. The confession sent a ripple of murmurs through the court. Rosalyn's mind raced back to that day 3 weeks ago, when she'd been carrying linens through the corridor, and the Shadow King had passed by. She looked up, unable to help herself, drawn by the power that emanated from him. Their eyes had met for a single heartbeat before she'd quickly lowered her gaze and hurried away. She'd thought nothing of it, assumed it was meaningless, but he'd remembered. He'd paused because he'd felt something even then, before he knew what she was. So you sought to have her killed, the Shadow King said, his voice flat with contempt. Out of jealousy, out of spite. You would have murdered my mate, the one fate itself chose for me, because she dared to exist in your presence. Please, Your Majesty, I didn't know. I didn't know she was First Blood. Didn't know she was... It wouldn't have mattered to you if she were mortal or fey or First Blood itself, he interrupted. You saw someone you perceived as beneath you, and you decided her life was worth nothing. He looked at Lord Hectorus. Lady Isoldra is hereby banished from the Moonstone Court. She has 3 days to vacate her holdings, and if she is found within our borders after that time, the shadows themselves will consume her. Lady Isoldra collapsed to her knees, wailing, but the Shadow King had already dismissed her from his attention. He turned back to Rosalyn, his expression softening in a way that made her heart clench. Come, he said, guiding her toward the dais. We need to talk privately. There is much you don't understand about what's happening between us. Your Majesty, Rosalyn started, but he shook his head. Zayn, he corrected, his silver eyes intense on hers. When we're alone, you will call me Zayn. You are to be my mate, my queen. I will not have formality between us. The throne room fell away as he led her through a side door, his shadows forming a barrier that prevented anyone from following. They walked in silence through obsidian corridors that Rosalyn had never been allowed to enter, past tapestries depicting ancient battles and conquered realms, until they reached a set of doors carved with scenes of night and shadow. The doors opened at his touch, revealing chambers that stole Rosalyn's breath. Everything was done in shades of midnight and silver, from the heavy curtains to the plush carpets to the massive bed that dominated one wall. Moonlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating shelves of ancient books and artifacts that hummed with power. Zayn guided her to a plush chair near the fireplace, where blue flames danced without heat. He knelt before her, his hands taking hers gently, and the contact sent sparks of magic dancing across her skin. Tell me your story, he said, his thumb stroking over her palms. How does one of First Blood come to serve as a mortal in my court? Rosalyn looked at their joined hands, at the way her smaller fingers seemed to fit perfectly between his, and felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd kept her secret for so long, had carried the weight of her identity alone through 3 years of fear and hiding, and now here was this powerful, beautiful king looking at her like she was precious, asking her to share the truth. "My mother saved me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "On the night of the purge, when your father's army joined with King Aldric's forces to hunt down everyone of First Blood. I was 12 years old. My mother, she was a princess of the old line before everything fell. She used the last of her magic to open a portal to the mortal realm and shoved me through." Tears spilled down her cheeks now. "The last thing I heard was her screaming as they found her." Zayn's hands tightened on hers, and she saw something like pain flash through his silver eyes. "I was young then, barely 20. I knew nothing of my father's plans until after the purge was complete. By then, it was too late to stop it." His voice roughened. "If I had known, if I had understood what they intended—" "It doesn't matter now," Rosalyn said, though her heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. "Everyone I loved died that night. I survived in the mortal realm for 15 years, hiding what I was, never using my magic. But eventually, I couldn't resist anymore. I needed to see my homeland again, needed to know if anything of the old ways remained." She laughed bitterly. "So, I came back and took a position as a servant, thinking I could hide in plain sight. For 3 years, it worked. Until Lady Isoldra decided I was a threat." "You're not a threat," Zayn said, lifting one hand to cup her face. "You're a miracle. Do you understand that? First Blood hasn't been seen in this realm for 27 years. We thought you were extinct, thought the magic of the old world was lost forever." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But here you are, alive, and fated to me." "I don't understand that part," Rosalyn admitted. "How can you be so certain I'm your mate? We've barely spoken." "Because I feel it in every fiber of my being," he said, his eyes blazing brighter. "Because the moment I scented you in that throne room, my magic recognized yours. Because when I look at you, I see my future, my destiny, everything I've been searching for without knowing what I sought." He leaned closer, close enough that she could feel his breath on her lips. "Because my shadows, which obey no one but me, sing in your presence. Look." Rosalyn glanced down and gasped. His shadows were indeed moving toward her, pooling around her feet and climbing up her legs like curious cats, their touch cool and gentle and somehow affectionate. And her own magic, suppressed for so long, was reaching back, manifesting as threads of silver light that wove through his darkness. "I've never seen my magic behave like this," she whispered, watching the interplay of light and shadow with wonder. "I've always had to force it down, lock it away, but with you it just flows." "Because we balance each other," Zayn said. "Light and darkness, old magic and new, First Blood and Shadow King." His hand moved to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. "You were made for me, Rosalyn, as I was made for you, and I will spend the rest of my immortal existence proving it to you." Before she could respond, before she could process the enormity of what he was saying, his lips were on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving her the chance to pull away. But the moment their lips met, Rosalyn felt something inside her chest crack open, felt her magic surge in response to his, felt the world tilt and reshape itself around this single, perfect moment. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, and felt him smile against her mouth. His shadows wrapped around them both, cocooning them in darkness, while her light pulsed in response, creating patterns of luminescence that danced across his skin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rosalyn could see a silver mark glowing on Zayn's throat, an intricate pattern of swirls and ancient symbols that she recognized from her mother's stories. The mating mark. Physical proof of their bond, visible to anyone with eyes to see. Mine, Zayn breathed, his fingers tracing the matching mark that she could now feel burning on her own throat. The bond has begun. Soon it will be complete, and nothing in this realm or any other will be able to sever what fate has joined. Zayn, Rosalyn whispered, testing his name on her tongue, tasting the power in it. What happens now? The court, they won't accept this. They won't accept me. The court will accept what I decree, he said, rising to his feet and pulling her up with him. You are my mate, my chosen queen. Any who challenge that, challenge me. His expression softened slightly as he looked at her. But you're right that there will be resistance. The old families won't want first blood on the throne. They'll see you as a threat to their power. Maybe we should wait, Rosalyn suggested, fear coiling in her stomach. Give them time to adjust to the idea before... No. The word was absolute. I've waited 300 years for you. I won't hide what you are or what we are to each other. Tomorrow night, at the full moon, there will be a formal mating ceremony. The entire court will witness our bond, and you will be crowned as my queen. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist. I know you're afraid, but I swear to you, on my power and my name, that I will let no harm come to you. The shadows themselves will rise to your defense. Rosalyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him it was too fast, too dangerous. But looking into his silver eyes, feeling the rightness of his arms around her, sensing her magic twining with his in perfect harmony, she couldn't deny the truth. This was fate. This was destiny. And fighting it would be like trying to hold back the tide. Tomorrow night, she agreed, and felt his arms tighten around her in response. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew in that moment, was that the enemies gathering against them were far more numerous and far more dangerous than either could imagine. In a shadowed chamber far beneath the palace, Lord Hectorus paced before a gathered circle of the oldest families, his face twisted with rage. First blood on the throne, he spat, his hands clenching. It's an insult to everything we fought for, everything we sacrificed during the purge. If we allow this to stand, who knows what other remnants of the old magic will crawl out of hiding. The Shadow King is powerful, Lord Calum said carefully, his fingers steepled before him. We cannot move against him directly without risking civil war. Then we move against the girl, a new voice said, and the assembled conspirators turned to see a figure emerge from the deeper shadows. She was tall and slim, with hair like burnished copper and eyes that glowed with an unnatural green light. Lady Nefara, the court's most powerful sorceress, smiled coldly. Kill her before the mating ceremony is complete and the bond will shatter. The Shadow King will be weakened, vulnerable. We can claim he's unfit to rule, that his judgment is compromised by his obsession with a dead woman. But how? Lord Hectorus demanded. He keeps her in his chambers, surrounded by his shadows. No blade can penetrate that darkness. No poison can reach her there. Lady Nefara's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed a bit too sharp. "Leave that to me," she purred. "I have access to magic that even the Shadow King doesn't know exists. Old magic. Forbidden magic. Magic that can sever a soul bond before it's complete." She drew a small vial from her robes, filled with liquid that seemed to writhe within the glass. "One drop of this in her wine at tomorrow's ceremony, and she'll be dead before the bonding ritual can finish. And with her death, the Shadow King's power will fracture. He'll be easy to dispose of then." The conspirators leaned forward, their faces hungry with anticipation. Plans were made. Servants were bribed. Assassins were hired as backup should the poison fail. By the time they dispersed into the pre-dawn darkness, Rosalyn's death was all but certain. But what none of them knew, what they couldn't have anticipated, was that Rosalyn's magic was not the soft, gentle power of the first blood they remembered from the Purge. Her mother had been a princess, yes, but her father had been something else entirely, something older, something that predated even the first blood, and that power was beginning to wake. Rosalyn dreamed that night wrapped in Zayn's arms, his shadows forming a protective cocoon around them. She dreamed of a silver tree growing in a realm of starlight, its roots stretching down into darkness and its branches reaching up into infinity. She dreamed of power that sang in her blood, power that had been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to emerge. In her dream, the tree spoke to her in a voice like distant thunder. "Daughter of both realms, child of light and darkness, the time comes when you must choose, remain hidden, or rise and claim what was stolen from your bloodline." "I'm afraid," Dream Rosalyn whispered. "I don't know how to be what everyone needs me to be." "You need only be yourself," the tree said, its branches swaying in an unfelt wind. "The power is already yours. The strength already lives within you. Trust in what you are. Trust in the bond that fate has woven. And when the moment comes, do not hesitate. The shadows and the light must stand together, or both will fall." She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Zayn's silver eyes watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You were dreaming," he said, his hand stroking through her hair. "Your magic was flickering, patterns I've never seen before. What did you dream of?" "A silver tree," Rosalyn said, the images still vivid in her mind, "and a voice that told me power was coming, that I needed to trust in our bond." She met his gaze. "Zayn, I'm scared about tonight. Something feels wrong, like there's a storm coming." His expression grew serious, and he sat up, pulling her with him. "My shadows have been restless too," he admitted. "They sense danger, though they cannot tell me its source. But Rosalyn," he cupped her face in both hands, "whatever comes, we face it together. Your magic and mine, light and darkness. Do you understand? You're not alone anymore." "Together," she agreed, and felt something settle in her chest, a certainty that drove back the fear. "I'm tired of hiding what I am. If there are enemies in this court, let them show themselves. I won't run anymore." Pride blazed in Zayn's eyes. "There's my queen," he murmured, and kissed her forehead. "Now let's get you ready for your coronation. The court is about to meet the true power of first blood, and I intend to make sure they never forget it." The hours passed in a blur of preparations. Zayn had summoned the court's finest seamstresses, who created a gown for Rosalyn that seemed woven from moonlight itself. Silver fabric that shimmered and flowed like water, cut to display the mating mark on her throat, while covering the scars the iron chains had left on her wrists. They swept her dark hair up in an elaborate style threaded with diamonds that caught the light like stars. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the regal woman staring back at her. "Is that really me?" she whispered, touching the dress with trembling fingers. Zayn came up behind her, his hand settling on her waist as he met her eyes in the reflection. "That's you as you were always meant to be," he said. "Not a servant, not someone forced to hide, but a queen. My queen." He pressed a kiss to the mating mark on her throat, and she felt their magic pulse in response. "And soon, when the ceremony is complete, our bond will be unbreakable. We'll be able to sense each other's emotions, share our power, live as long as the other lives." "And if something goes wrong?" Rosalyn asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her all day. "If someone tries to stop the ceremony, then they'll learn why I'm called the Shadow King," Zayn said, his voice dropping to something dark and threatening. "No one will touch you while I draw breath. I swear it on my very soul." As twilight fell and the full moon began to rise, they made their way to the grand amphitheater, a vast open-air space where the most important ceremonies of the Moonstone Court were conducted. Rosalyn's heart hammered as they emerged into the circular space, and she saw the hundreds of Fae assembled to witness their bonding. Every noble family was represented, their faces displaying everything from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. The high priestess waited at the center of the amphitheater, standing beside the ancient bonding stone, a massive pillar of crystal that pulsed with silver light. She was ancient, her face lined with centuries of life, her white hair flowing to her feet. When she looked at Rosalyn, there was recognition in her ageless eyes. "Shadow King Zayn," she intoned, her voice carrying easily through the space. "You bring before us one of first blood, and claim her as your mate. This is unprecedented. This challenges tradition. Are you certain this is the path you would walk?" "I am certain," Zayn said, his hand tight around Rosalyn's. "Rosalyn of First Blood is my fated mate, chosen by destiny itself. I claim her before the court, before the moon, before the ancient powers that govern all Fae. Let any who would challenge this speak now or forever hold their silence." The amphitheater fell silent. Rosalyn could feel hostile gazes burning into her from all directions, could sense the undercurrents of resentment and rage rippling through the assembled nobles. But no one spoke. No one dared challenge the Shadow King directly. "Then let the bonding begin," the High Priestess said. She gestured for Zayn and Rosalyn to approach the crystal pillar. "Place your hands upon the bonding stone. Let your magic merge. Speak the ancient vows, and let the moon herself witness the joining of your souls." They moved to the stone together, and Rosalyn gasped as she placed her palm against the cool crystal. Power surged up from the stone, ancient and vast, connecting her to every bonding that had ever occurred in this space. Beside her, Zayn placed his hand over hers, and their magic erupted in a brilliant display, his shadows and her light twining together, spiraling up into the night sky. "I, Zayn, Shadow King of the Dark Fae, claim you as my mate," he said, his silver eyes locked on hers. "I pledge my power to your protection, my strength to your defense, my heart to your keeping. From this night forward, your joys are my joys, your sorrows, my sorrows. Where you walk, I will follow. What you love, I will cherish. We are one soul in two bodies, bound by magic, sealed by fate." Tears streamed down Rosalyn's face as she spoke her own vows, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to choke her. "I, Rosalyn of first blood, accept you as my mate. I pledge my light to your darkness, my magic to your power, my heart to your soul. From this night forward, we stand together against whatever may come. I will be your shield and your sanctuary, your partner and your equal. We are one, now and forever." The bonding stone blazed so bright that nobles cried out, shielding their eyes. Magic poured from it in waves, wrapping around Zayn and Rosalyn, binding them together in threads of power that glowed like captured starlight. Rosalyn felt Zayn's presence in her mind, felt his emotions, pride, love, fierce protectiveness, as clearly as if they were her own. And she knew he could feel her too, could sense her fear and determination, and the growing certainty that together, they were unstoppable. "The bond is complete," the High Priestess breathed. "Shadow and light, darkness and radiance, merged as one. I have never, in all my centuries, seen magic like this." But as she spoke, as the assembled court began to murmur and shift, Rosalyn sensed something wrong. A presence in the crowd that didn't belong, a darkness that wasn't Zayn's. She turned, her eyes scanning the nobles, and saw Lady Nefara moving through the crowd with a goblet of wine in her hands. "A toast to the new queen!" Lady Nefara called, her voice warm and welcoming as she approached. "Surely we should celebrate this momentous occasion with the finest wine our cellars have to offer." But Rosalyn's magic was screaming warnings. The wine in that goblet was wrong, tainted, deadly. She could sense it now, the poisonous magic writhing within the liquid, designed to sever soul bonds and destroy the drinker from within. "Zayn!" she started to say, but Lady Nefara was already lifting the goblet toward her lips. "Drink, my lady," Nefara urged, and Rosalyn saw the mad gleam in her green eyes, the certainty of success. "Welcome your new position with a sip of celebration." Time seemed to slow. Rosalyn could see Zayn turning, his shadows already moving to intercept, but he was too far away. The goblet was inches from her mouth. One drop would be enough to kill her, to shatter the bond they'd just completed, to leave Zayn vulnerable to whatever coup the conspirators had planned. And in that crystalline moment of danger, Rosalyn's power woke fully. It rose from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that predated the first blood, predated even the Fae themselves. Ancient magic, wild and primal, that had been waiting for this exact moment to emerge. Silver light exploded from her body in a wave that sent nobles stumbling back, sent the goblet flying from Nefara's hands to shatter on the ground, its poisoned contents burning through the stone where it landed. But the light didn't stop. It grew brighter, more intense, until Rosalyn was sheathed in radiance that rivaled the full moon overhead. And in the light, she could see everything. Every plot, every conspirator, every thread of betrayal that had been woven against her and Zayn. "Enough!" she said, and her voice echoed with layers of power, with magic that made the very air vibrate. You would poison me at my own bonding ceremony. You would threaten the mate of your king. You dare! Lady Nefara's confident expression crumbled into terror as Rosalyn advanced on her, as the light around her intensified until it was painful to look upon. Please, I was only... You were only trying to murder me, Rosalyn finished, her magic reaching out to wrap around the sorceress, holding her immobile. You and Lord Hectorus and Lord Calum and how many others? How many nobles in this court thought they could kill me and weaken my mate? She turned to face the assembled crowd and watched as dozens of nobles flinched back from her gaze. Her power had revealed them all, every single conspirator, their guilt written in their auras like words in fire. Step forward, she commanded. Everyone who plotted against me tonight, step forward and face judgment. Compelled by her magic, 47 nobles moved through the crowd to stand before her, including Lord Hectorus and Lord Calum. Their faces were masks of terror as they knelt before her blazing power. Zayn appeared at her side, his shadows rising to complement her light, and together they were a sight that would be spoken of in whispers for generations. Darkness and radiance, shadow and silver, perfectly balanced and utterly devastating. You conspired to kill my mate, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. To shatter our bond, to weaken me, to overthrow the throne. The penalty for such treason is death. No, Rosalyn said, and felt Zayn's surprise through their bond. She looked at the kneeling conspirators, at their terror, and felt no mercy. But she also felt no desire for slaughter. Death would be too quick, too easy. She raised her hand, and silver light streamed from her fingers to wrap around each conspirator. I strip from you your titles, your lands, your positions at court. You will be exiled to the mortal realm, bound by magic to never return to the Feylands. You will live out your immortal lives among humans, powerless, forgotten, watching the centuries pass while knowing what you lost through your own treachery. The spell took hold, and the conspirators screamed as their magic was sealed away, as their immortality was bound to prevent them from dying, but not from aging slowly in a world they despised. Portals opened beneath them, and one by one, they vanished, cast out into the mortal realm to face their punishment. When the last conspirator had disappeared, Rosalyn let her power recede, let the blazing light dim to a gentle glow that still clung to her skin like moonlight. She swayed slightly, exhausted from the massive expenditure of magic. But Zayn was there instantly, his arms around her, his presence in her mind steadying her. What you just did, he breathed against her hair. That magic. I've never seen anything like it. Not even from the oldest Fae. What are you, Rosalyn? I don't entirely know, she admitted, leaning into his strength. But I think my father was more than just first blood. I think he was something older, something that's been sleeping in my bloodline for generations. The high priestess approached them slowly, her ancient face filled with wonder. Starborn, she whispered, the word falling into sudden silence. The legends speak of them. Fae who existed before the division of courts, before the separation of light and dark. They could wield both shadow and radiance, could pass judgment with absolute authority. She bowed deeply before Rosalyn. "You are not just first blood, my queen. You carry the magic of the very first Fae, the ones who walked with the stars themselves." Rosalyn absorbed this information, felt it settle into place like a missing piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. Starborn. It felt right, felt true. And looking at Zayn, at the wonder and love and fierce pride in his silver eyes, she understood why fate had brought them together. "Shadow and starlight," he murmured, pulling her closer. "We really were made for each other." "Yes," she agreed, and kissed him as the assembled court erupted into cheers, as the moon blazed overhead, as their magic twined together in perfect harmony. The ceremony concluded with Rosalyn being crowned queen, a circlet of woven shadow and light materializing on her brow as the court swore their allegiance. Those who had remained loyal watched with genuine respect, while those who had harbored doubts kept their silence, understanding now that challenging the new queen would be folly. In the days that followed, Rosalyn settled into her role with a grace that surprised even herself. The servants who had once worked alongside her now bowed as she passed, but she made sure to remember their names, to ask after their families, to ensure no one in her court would ever face the kind of injustice she had endured. She and Zayn ruled together, their combined magic bringing prosperity to the realm as Shadow and Starlight worked in concert to heal old wounds and forge new alliances. And at night, wrapped in each other's arms with their magic humming contentedly between them, they would speak of the future, of the children they would have who would carry both Shadow and Starlight, of the new age they would usher in, where power came not from bloodline alone, but from wisdom and compassion. "I waited 300 years for you," Zayn murmured one evening, his fingers tracing the permanent mating mark that glowed silver on her throat. "And I would have waited 300 more. You were worth every moment of that wait." "I spent so many years hiding, afraid of what I was," Rosalyn replied, her hand covering his over her heart. "But you saw me. You recognized me when I was wearing chains and covered in shame, and you claimed me anyway. You made me believe I was worthy of being loved." "You were always worthy," he said, pulling her closer until there was no space between them. "You just needed someone to see past the disguise to the power beneath. And now the whole realm knows. Our queen is not just first blood, not just Starborn. She's the woman who turned exile into coronation, who turned enemies into exiles, who stood before the assembled court and declared her worth without apology." "We're going to change everything," Rosalyn said, certainty ringing in her voice. "The old hatreds, the old divisions, we're going to show them a better way." "Together," Zayn agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of shadow and starlight, of destiny and choice, of a love that had been written in the stars before either of them had drawn their first breath. And in the moonlight streaming through their windows, their magic danced, darkness and light, forever intertwined, forever balanced, forever whole. What do you think about the story? Let me know your comments. I would appreciate each of your thoughts. Also, comment which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out on the next videos. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!